Welcome to BizTech's Technology Show. Our guest for today is Nagesh Devata, the Senior Vice President, Go-to-Market APAC at Payoneer. Payoneer claims to be the world's go-to partner for digital commerce everywhere. Now, to tell us more, Nagesh, welcome to the show.
Hi, Brian. Good day. Thank you for having me here today. And maybe just to give a brief background and introduction on Payoneer. So as you mentioned, we really see ourselves as a platform, a single platform, the go-to platform for businesses, small businesses and entrepreneurs anywhere globally to be able to connect globally, to be able to do their cross-border commerce and to be able to access markets and the tools they need to do to access those markets, whether it's in terms of different sort of financial tools, being able to connect with businesses and platforms around the world, to be able to be paid and get paid, and in all types of currencies. So that's really our mission, to be able to connect these businesses in all parts of the world with other parts of the world and for them to realize the potential that they could as a business.
Now, tell us about its history. You've got a 15-year-old history, and when did you actually come into Asia?
Payoneer, as you mentioned, right, has about a 15-year history. Payoneer in Asia Pacific has probably been in the region for the past 6 years or so as well, focused on the Asia Pacific region, very much, really seeing an opportunity to drive and connect the growth of small businesses, sellers, exporters that originate in the Asia Pacific region, whether it's in countries like Vietnam, Korea, Japan, or China. Very much around these types of markets who are export countries where they're producing goods and services. But then even if I kind of fast forward to the last couple of years, we've seen such a growth in terms of other industries such as social commerce, freelancing, e-commerce sellers. So we've seen that growth. And so APAC is very much this market of creativity and entrepreneurship.
And what was interesting, Nagesh, was actually the following. As I was doing research for this interview, I walked through the whole plethora of steps that you need to go through in terms of cross-border payments. And the fact that what was very interesting is Payoneer has every little piece of that solution to help some of those communities that you talked about, everything from marketing agencies to vacation host rental, right, to freelancers, as you mentioned. Why perhaps have you not been more well-known in the Asia Pacific region? Because, you've got the whole solution suite there, A to Z.
So when I think about, Payoneer's presence and Payoneer's, coverage in the region, I think, again, if you go within those communities, we're very much, the go-to solution, or we have great awareness and great relationships with the stakeholders in those communities. And again, because we play in the business-to-business side of commerce and cross-border commerce, I think, again, when we think about, the communities that we serve, we are very well known in those communities. Now, there are many other markets in Asia Pacific. There are other industries and verticals, and these are all areas that we're looking to further expand. And again, I think what I think customers look for, again, they're looking for reliability. They're looking for geographic coverage. They're looking for global coverage, and they're looking for trust and credibility. So I think from that perspective, we are, we're quite known among those stakeholders. But for sure, again, one of our desires and goals is to, further expand our brand and our reach to more and more customers who are looking to go cross-border.
Now, Nagesh, could you share some success stories of how you've helped your customers?
Sure. I think there's so many, but maybe just touching on some of the examples we talked about and the types of customers we serve. So you could imagine, maybe I'll just talk about some of the different scenarios. So you have freelancers that are selling on a platform and providing a service to a customer in the US. So that could be a freelancer in the Philippines and how they could provide their services through either a platform, a global platform that provides freelancing services, or being able to connect to a service or a company that needs their services, say in the United States. And really where we come in is we're able to help this business or this entrepreneur scale their business now, looking beyond just their traditional borders. So for that freelancer now, it's a way to think about many markets globally. And one of the challenges and one of the areas that we try to address or thinking about their needs is being able to conduct their business in a really easy way when it comes to providing their services, say globally, getting paid easily and being able to pay someone else easily are probably some of the best use cases. So that's one example, freelancers. Other examples are things like an e-commerce seller. And e-commerce sellers are, and I think all of us kind of experienced this during COVID. We all were shopping online. We were doing much more. So we saw the growth of e-commerce sellers really, jump up like everybody else did. But as an e-commerce seller, and you could take any number of markets. So we can think about markets like Vietnam, Korea, or Japan, just examples. But think about an e-commerce seller that might have only been either a casual seller or someone who has historically only sold domestically in their home market. Now, by thinking about the world and being much more global, we were able to work with our sellers to give them access to more markets. So selling onto another country, selling onto another platform, and that opens up the potential for these sellers. And the way they can overcome some of these challenges is, how do I get paid again? How do I collect the earnings that I made from selling overseas? And we saw tremendous growth among these sellers. Many other examples I can share, Brian, in the social streaming vertical. We talked about the freelancing vertical, the e-commerce verticals. So we saw great growth, and I think we saw, just the general trend of cross-border commerce definitely grow substantially.
Okay, I want to zoom in on that now in terms of the whole payments industry in the Asia Pacific region. And the pandemic obviously accelerated, as you just alluded to, accelerated growth in e-commerce overall. And therefore, then your business then took off like a rocket ship. Could you share some key trends that have taken place in terms of the payments industry in the Asia Pacific region?
Yeah, sure. I think the payments industry in APAC, or the Asia Pacific region, first of all, super dynamic. It's maybe this is my own bias. Being in Asia, being in this part of the world, I think it's one of the most dynamic markets in the world. You have such a level of complexity in the region. You have mature markets, you have emerging markets, you have developing markets, and the needs of the markets, I think, has elevated the type of innovation that you see, across the payments industry. Providing solutions. And so I touched on the point about being paid and how do you get paid, right? So two things we take for granted, right? Like, I need to pay a vendor or supplier somewhere else overseas, and I need to receive funds through somebody else that owes me money. And while they maybe seem sort of like simplistic things, that in itself, and being able to provide a level of innovation, so speed in terms of getting real-time payments, being able to get, be supported in multiple currencies, being able to see everything through a dashboard, being able to access markets around the world where you can almost operate like having a virtual account in those markets. These are all I think elements of innovation I would call out. And I think, again, the Asia Pacific region, just because of its complexity, its diversity, you see so much happening. Again, on some levels trying to solve what happens within the region. On another level, what people are trying to do in terms of solving from APAC to another region. And then when you try to put it all together, right? I think that's again is sort of where the innovation comes in APAC. You have lots of people kind of playing in different aspects of that value chain. But ultimately, if trying to put it all together to give your customer a holistic solution is sort of how we tend to try to approach it, and giving them an end-to-end approach, whether it's how they receive funds, as I mentioned, how does someone pay onto someone's platform or their website, but then also how do you get those funds, and then how do you move them off your website and into someone's bank account or into your account. And really we're thinking about how does this person operate as a business, and giving them the tools.
And Nagesh, one of the key things that you brought up was the fact that Asia Pacific is so complex. So you have mature markets, you have emerging markets, and then you have developing markets. So especially in the emerging and developing markets, solutions like yours really in a lot of ways help a small business or even a larger business really circumvent the issues of inefficient banking systems.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm not sure I would say circumvent is as the word I would use, but I think it's maybe complement, and I think this is some of the challenges again we hear where the feedback from customers around one, traditional banks innovating fast enough. Two, are they being served by the traditional banks really in terms of their needs? And I think, again, that historically has always been a challenge. Traditional banks haven't focused on the young entrepreneur, a digital entrepreneur, or that smaller SMB. It's only when they start to become somewhat bigger and more meaningful that they start to get attention. So I think from our perspective, it's always about, one, can we give them that global coverage? Two, can we provide the level of support that they're looking for? And I think that's also a big element here, and giving that. We're also seeing banks, I think to a certain extent recognizing this, which is why you're seeing banks starting to also try to collaborate with fintechs like us and complement their solutions with a solution like what Payoneer offers, and try to bring that to the market in a more holistic way as well. But there's definitely, I think, some challenges when you think about the traditional banks and the gaps that they have.
Now, I want to get your views on the rise of embedded finance in APAC. So obviously, leading on from what you just said, embedded finance basically is also disrupting the traditional banks, because they're offering customers access to financial services that perhaps they traditionally would have got from a bank, but now they get it through a tech platform. Walk us through that and some of the innovations that you've been involved in, and also what's happening in this space.
So if you think of, there's obviously a lot happening on this front, and I think the idea of an embedded experience varies dramatically. So there's so many different ways of thinking about what is that embedded experience. I think there are many players trying to take on different pieces of that value chain and trying to incorporate that in terms of a platform or a solution. So that would be the first thing. I think from our perspective as Payoneer, I guess where we've tried to play a role is really playing with our strengths. Our strengths is very much about enabling cross-border commerce, enabling that cross-border commerce and being able to support that small business as well, right? So that's sort of the first thing. And when you think about the traditional banks, again, as we talked about earlier, this is not an area that they have traditionally focused on or have also provided the level of customer service, which is something that we provide on. So when we're thinking about that experience of something a bit more embedded, this is where we've taken our cross-border solution and provided some of our tools through either an API or an integration with the bank. So to be able to give the bank's customers access to a solution that allows that small business to be able to scale globally. So through that interface and give them access to the Payoneer solution. So we've done a number of such integrations and partnerships across the region, and being able to help our customers scale globally, but really going through something that they're familiar with. In this case, maybe it's their bank, but then getting the best of a global solution when it comes to either a fintech or a cross-border solution.
One of the services or offerings of fintechs that has really captured the imagination of the consumer is buy now, pay later. Now, what's your view on this, and what do you see this? How do you see this moving forward? Because some red flags are starting to appear already in this space.
So for me, for buy now, pay later, I think it's a very interesting phenomena in terms of over the last 2.5, 3 years as it's developed. It's again, I think the use case that I've observed is very much sort of more from a domestic consumer perspective in terms of buying goods in your home market. So I do think time will tell in terms of where this lands. I think again, is it really addressing a need for a customer, or is it giving them an alternative that is it just another alternative among a bunch of other payment methods? So that's kind of how I see it personally. Really, I come back to, are we solving a need? Are we solving a problem? Or is it just another payment choice among many other payment choices? And I do think, it's still going to take some time before this one's figured out, and where it lands and how many consumers are going to adopt it, and is it truly addressing a need?
One of the barriers to innovation in some markets is really the regulatory framework. And again, back to what you said earlier in the conversation around the level of maturity in Asia Pacific. So mature markets, emerging markets, and developing markets. How do you see the regulatory framework evolving in the payments landscape in the next 12 to 24 months, particularly in some of these markets that perhaps have been lagging?
Yeah, interesting question there, Brian. I think that's always that's always a harder one for us to kind of predict and think about. But when I think about the regulatory landscape, again, I think again, obviously all the regulators are trying to do what they think is best in terms of each of the markets and figure out what's best. But I think the way we kind of always view it is making sure that customers are we're all striving to those standards as well, in terms of thinking about knowing your customer, the KYC elements of it. I think those are all relevant considerations. But when it comes to sort of more of the regulatory side, I think again, I think it can also be potentially a catalyst for innovation as well, but in a more structured way, right? So I think it's an opportunity, to also help businesses and merchants, help them identify more credible and better solutions for their business, so that they can to grow and scale. And I think that's very much sort of where I come back from this perspective, thinking about it more from reputation and credibility, and providing confidence and safety and security for those customers and those businesses that want to do business. And in our case, whether it's cross-border, whether it's somebody who wants to do something domestically.
Now, Nagesh, what can we expect in terms of growth from Payoneer over the next 1 to 2 years in the Asia Pacific? Which markets do you think are going to resonate best with you from a growth perspective, and also which sectors?
Yeah, so maybe I'll just start talking about from a sector point of view. So, what we saw during COVID is we saw huge uptick we saw growth across a number of different verticals and industries. We saw it in the social streaming vertical. We saw it in the e-learning segment. We saw it in the e-commerce segment, freelancing as a segment. All of these saw an uptick and were definitely influenced by COVID. Now, as COVID kind of is, maybe normalizing, let's call it normalizing, I do think I think some of these trends are going to start to shift and evolve as well. And again, we're looking at these trends. How much, how many consumers are going to shop online? I do think there's going to be a little bit of normalization around offline to online. So that's one question. I do think some of these sectors are going to see, again, some normalization, but also, of course, growth. We're seeing growth that is now, fast forwarded growth that might have taken 7 years has, we're on that curve after 2.5, 3 years now. So some of these sectors are now just moving at a different level as well. But I think when we think about growth or verticals going forward, I think there's a demand, first of all, by consumers to consume more services in terms of online services. So something you mentioned in the beginning, Brian, right? Like we talked about travel. So travel, to me, again, it's a segment I think you will see, which was a little bit, not as fast growing over the last couple of years for obvious reasons. I think will be one of those sectors that you will start to see, that growth as everyone starts to get back out there and people, whether they're, going into shared accommodations or different types of travel services, I think you'll see as one of those verticals as well. But I also do think what COVID did, it helped to unlock a lot of segments. And maybe some of these segments are segments that were trailing over the last couple of years versus sort of your traditional e-commerce, e-learning, social verticals. But some of these sectors, which took a bit more time to get there in terms of maturity, are now starting to figure out online. And we are seeing lots of different types of use cases. We're seeing exporters, for example. We're seeing exporters like trading companies that historically were offline companies, but now starting to move online. We're seeing these companies also sell their goods and services to more markets globally. So that connection is, becoming more sticky. And maybe 5 years ago, maybe that company in the US that was buying something from, say, a company in Vietnam or Korea would have, might have been a much more non-digital experience. Now that's becoming a digital experience. And you can start to see these exporters, for example, saying, hey, I can sell my goods and services to other markets. I also think there's other trends that, which are more around thinking about manufacturing and where's manufacturing going to shift to. We're starting to see some of those trends also evolve. Some of the manufacturing is shifting to new markets, maybe being, not just China, but diversifying to other markets in the Asia Pacific region, Vietnam, Korea, Japan. Again, some of these, we're seeing more diversity in terms of manufacturing, which opens up more markets, more opportunities for these companies and these businesses. But our traditional, some of those traditional e-commerce sectors, I think will continue to grow. But you're going to see more new sectors, more, some of the growth areas from new sectors and new verticals.
Nagesh, it's been a fascinating conversation. Any final thoughts you'd like to leave the audience with?
Well, when I think about, for me, again, when I'm thinking about any business that's thinking about how to go online or how to go cross-border, I would truly encourage them to look beyond their borders. So for me, very much, it's really a passion for me. It's how to encourage businesses, big and small, to look beyond their borders and to look at connecting globally. I think there's just so much opportunity out there, and really very much of this, I really feel, is about education and understanding how to do it and how to connect. There's a lot of resources out there. There are a lot of different organizations that have tools, have capabilities. Of course, Payoneer is a very integral part of this, but there are many other sort of stakeholders that can help empower that journey. And for me, I've seen so many use cases, Brian, that when I've seen a small business or that digital streamer or that freelancer, I've seen the potential of those businesses in terms of what can happen when they start to go cross-border and start to see I can be paid, I can get paid, and I can remove some of those challenges that maybe historically I thought about.
Nagesh, thank you very much for taking your time to be on the show.
Thank you, Brian. It's been a pleasure, and I really appreciate it.
I'm Brian Fernandez, and we've been speaking to Nagesh Devata, the Senior Vice President, Go-to-Market APAC at Payoneer on BizTech's Technology Show. This video and podcast will be on our social media platforms as well as our website, www.biztech.asia. It'll also be on our syndication partners, TV stations, radio stations, and websites. Thanks a lot for tuning in.